Philippe Aghion is a professor at Collège de France and INSEAD, and a visiting professor at the London School of Economics. A leading scholar in growth and innovation economics. He notably pioneered with Peter Howitt the Schumpeterian growth paradigm. His research examines the design of growth policies and the role of the state. He has received several prestigious awards, including the Euro Johnson Award and BBVA Frontier of Knowledge Award for developing an economic growth theory based on innovation that emerges from the process of creative destruction. Professor Aghion will be sharing his insights on the invaluable contribution of exiled scientists to innovation, offering both a historical and economic perspective. The forum focuses on the links between actors supporting at-risk researchers and non-academic sector will perfectly introduce all of today's sessions. And now I want to invite Professor Aghion on stage.
So, thank you so much for inviting me to to speak at this forum. So you ask, my research is on growth and innovation, and the most influential work, if any, is I developed what we call the Schumpeterian growth theory. And the Schumpeterian growth theory, it's a theory of economic growth that rests on three main ideas. The first idea is that long-run growth is driven by innovation, by the production of new ideas. Each innovator builds upon previous innovations, so openness is key to the process. The second idea is that innovations do not come from heaven. They are the result of research, basic research, but also entrepreneurial activities that are driven by the prospect of monopoly rents, of innovation rents. When you find a new product or a better way to produce, you get some rents for a while, and it's the prospects of these rents that induces, entrepreneurs to invest in innovative activities. And the third idea is creative destruction. The new replaces the old. New innovations make old technologies obsolete. So there is a perpetual conflict between the old and the new. There is a basic contradiction at the heart of the growth process. On the one hand, you need the innovation rents to motivate innovation activities, but on the other hand, yesterday's innovators are tempted to use their rents to prevent subsequent innovations because they don't want themselves to be subject to creative destruction. And regulating market economy is how to deal with this contradiction. So now I'll come closer to the topic, immigration and innovation. In fact, if in light of the Schumpeterian growth theory, there are several reasons why you want to have, migrations, exchange, cross-fertilization. So the first idea is that when people are mobile, if I can go to the US, or to other countries, if foreign researchers can come to Europe, if we can travel to China, to Egypt, it facilitates cross-fertilization because we are diverse. So we benefit from diverse experience, and we know that diversity is a big source of science and knowledge. Okay, so the first idea is that we need to have mobility and openness because this science is open, and openness and freedom lie at the heart of the discovery process. Okay, so that's a kind of market size, but it's a reason why openness and mobility are key to the innovation and growth process. The second reason is age. In fact, I told you that innovation is all about creative destruction. The new replaces the old. And typically, disruptive innovation typically is pushed primarily by younger individuals younger individuals are more inventive, they take more risk, they are less subject to past dependence, they are less influenced by what they did before, and they are less driven by the fear of replacing themselves. It's very interesting that Japan has ceased to be has been innovative, but is a bit less innovative than it used to be, partly because you have an aging population. And I think if the US managed to be quite innovative, it's because for a while they favored, movement, immigration of new researchers. I think that was key to and I will get back to, I'll come back to that in more details in a moment. So really the Chopin growth approach tells you right away that both because of a kind of market size effect, we need to have many people interacting with each other, and the age effect, I think it's important. Another reason is competition. We know that we innovate to escape competition. If I have a threat of entry, if I bring in very good elements in this room, the best elements of this room will work harder to remain the best in this room. So we know competition is another reason why it's good to be challenged all the time by having good researchers, good scientists coming from abroad and working with you. So that's the theory. The theory tells you that innovation-based growth has everything to gain from mobility and migrations, okay? But I would like to give you some kind of historical example of immigration and its role in innovation and growth. The historical example, for example, of European immigration to the US is particularly illuminating. So Michael Peters, who is my co-author, and other co-authors of his, explain in a recent study, they look at the period 1880-1920. And they note first that the US caught up with England and France to become the most technologically advanced country and the wealthiest in terms of per capita GDP. Second, the US welcomed large number of immigrants, most notably from Europe. And what they show is that there is a causal link between the fact they welcome large number of immigrants and the fact that they became the wealthiest country in terms of per capita GDP. Now they are reverting this trend. In fact, they match immigration records which contain information about immigrants' country of origin and arrival dates in the US with patent records for the period 1880-1920. And they are able to evaluate the effect of European immigration on American innovation and growth. And they show in particular that if the US had completely closed its borders to all foreign immigrants in 1880, its per capita GDP would have been 30% lower than the level they actually achieved in 1920. And why did immigration encourage growth through innovation 150 years ago? European immigrants to the US turned out to be prolific innovators, but only after they had spent several years in the US. So it's important that you be integrated. So you need immigration and integration. Okay, the data for the period 1880-1920 shows that European immigrants living in the US for 10 years or more were more likely to innovate than either native-born Americans or more recently arrived European immigrants. And the natural explanation proposed by the authors is that these migrants were able to capitalize on the ideas which they had been exposed to in their native lands so as to innovate once they were truly and permanently settled in the US. What we can say about the relation between immigration and innovation today? So more recently, a study focusing on the period 1976-2012 shows that foreign-born individuals who arrived in the US after the age of 20 were responsible for 23% of total output production, which was more than the demographic weight among innovators, 16%, and still more than their weight in the population as a whole, 10%. Thus, both in the recent and the remote past, it is clear that foreign-born individuals contributed substantially to innovation and growth in the United States. Furthermore, the same study shows that the unexpected or premature death of an innovator affects the productivity of his or her network of collaborators, measured in the number of patents filed by the latter. Such unexpected death can be interpreted as an unanticipated negative shock on his collaborators. It turns out that this shock results in a larger productivity decrease when the innovator is foreign-born than native-born. So you have a foreign-born collaborator dies, it has a more negative impact on your innovation. Immigrants' brains arrive with knowledge and experience garnered in their country of origin, which may in some domain be in advance of the receiving country. For example, consider Israeli innovators who migrate to other countries. Israel is a world leader in water production technologies. Countries that absorb the critical mass of Israeli innovators are more likely to achieve breakthroughs in water production. More generally, it is possible to demonstrate a causal link between immigration of foreign innovators with certain specialties and future innovations in those specialties in the receiving countries. Doubling the number of foreign innovators specializing in certain technologies yields a 25 to 60% greater likelihood that the receiving country will achieve a breakthrough in those technologies. Another important and related idea is that a diverse population consisting of qualified individuals who do not all come from the same country or region encourages innovation. Innovators of diverse backgrounds meld complementary cultures, skills, and forms of knowledge, thereby advancing understanding. In fact, a diverse range of skilled immigrants has a positive impact on productivity growth in the host country, as suggested by a study by my friend Alberto Alesina and co-authors, and Hillel Rapoport in France. At Paris School of Economics. Why does immigration of skilled individuals stimulate innovation in the host country? One reason has to do with education. For example, a study notes that between 1995 and 2008, immigration accounted for 29% increase in the proportion of US working population with a college degree. Immigrants were particularly prominent in the so-called STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Foreign-born individuals residing in the US were overrepresented among the 250 most cited authors in STEM fields, as well as among recipients in the Nobel Prize. A second reason has to do with the notion of intrinsic motivation. The argument relies on two statistical facts. First, immigrants and children of immigrants are not strictly better speaking at STEM fields than the native-born, but they tend to choose these fields in greater numbers, and therefore they are more likely to excel. Second, given equivalent level of education, immigrants seems to be more innovative. Taken together, these two observations suggest that immigrants are more enterprising, more determined, and more accepting of risk than native-born Americans. What accounts for intrinsic motivation? Two things. First, a selection process. Only the more daring and motivated individuals have sufficient desire and tolerance for risk to become immigrants. Second, the immigration process itself tends to foster a determination to succeed. I would like just to conclude this talk, to talk about what we are doing. The initiative, the president of France just launched this important initiative called Choose Europe, Choose France for Science, to attract the best foreign researchers and good foreign researchers from all countries worldwide. Okay? Two major events contributed to making such an initiative particularly timely. The first is the publication of the Draghi report, which highlights Europe's significant technological lag behind the US since the mid-90s. We used to catch up with the US, Europe, up between 1945 and 1995, and then again, the technological gap between US and Europe has widened up. Why? Because we failed to perform in breakthrough frontier innovation, whereas the US has done much better. The second, and Draghi is there to say, what can we do to make up for this? What can we do to reverse the trend and to catch up again with the most advanced? The second is the broad offensive led by the Trump administration against American universities and federal research agencies, which has naturally led researchers based in the US to consider relocating elsewhere. So there are two main initiatives that we took in France. One has been PAUSE, and the PAUSE initiative, and the problem with the PAUSE, so PAUSE has succeeded in attracting top researchers, you know, in countries where they could not operate, where they could not continue business as usual because they were persecuted, because they cannot just, they are fired from their job, they are persecuted, they are threat of being imprisoned. And so PAUSE has been a leader in attracting good researchers from countries where, for political reasons, they cannot operate. The problem is that PAUSE now has a budgetary constraint that prevents it from, you know, operating on a satisfactory scale. And I think it's very important. I heard that, you know, the president of France wants to devote 100 million euros to attracting top researchers. It would be great that out of this 100 million, you know, 3 or 4 million be allocated to PAUSE. I think 5 million, exactly. I have the 5 million out of 100. So that one big thing, pity that the minister left. I was hoping I should have started by that. But I think a big thing would be to say, out of the 100 million, no hesitation, allocate 5 million to PAUSE. Quoi. Voilà. Voilà. Alors, the second thing I would like to talk about the LabEx, Laboratoire d'Excellence. You know, we don't always do very great things. France is a great country, but the policy making is not always optimal. But whenever there is something that works well, we should point it out, okay? So one thing that seems to have been a success story is the LabEx, the Laboratoire d'Excellence, okay? So in fact, the LabEx, it's a program that was launched in 2010 to create laboratories of excellence in France. This program funded 170 public research clusters, each of them with a budget of 1.5 billion overall. And so for each LabEx, it was 1 million euro extra per project per year, guaranteed over 9 years, okay? So the overall thing was 1.5 billion, but each lab would receive 1 million per year over a 9-year period. Each cluster brings together several research teams around a common scientific theme, with the goal of producing high-level research and improving the international visibility of French science. A highly influential study by my colleague Antonin Bergeot, who is in my innovation lab at Collège de France, and co-authors of his, assessed the impact of the LabEx creation on industrial innovation around the LabEx. And what they showed is that the LabEx program had significant effect on the private sector. In particular, each euro invested in a laboratoire d'excellence led to an additional 0.78 euro of private R&D spending. Firms that were geographically and scientifically close to the funded LabEx saw their R&D employment increase by more than 15% compared to less exposed companies, and their production of high-end patents was significantly boosted. It boosted frontier innovation. You know, the big problem of Europe is that we are in mid-tech incremental innovation. We are not sufficiently in high-tech breakthrough. LabEx sparked breakthrough innovation, okay? So that's, we're so happy when something works in France, okay? So, and it does. We have no evidence that Crédit Impôt Recherche has, you know, it may work and not work, but there's been not a single study showing the effect, whereas the LabEx, we know that it works well, okay? So, So in fact, the LabEx instrument aimed at strengthening fundamental research has proven particularly effective in reaching the most innovative companies at the technological frontier, as they are the ones most capable of absorbing the research produced in scientific laboratories. So that's the thing. And what we should do is to extend the LabEx to Europe. And my idea was to say we have something called the European Research Council, okay, which funds individual grants, individual projects. So what I proposed, and in fact I was very happy that the President of France, you know, took on this idea in his speech 2 days ago, was to extend the ERC program and to have ERC for labs. So we should have, you know, the ERC manages 16 billion. I recommended that we add a 10 billion so that they could introduce ERC for Labs program, okay, and to fund European LabEx. We have the French LabEx, and we should extend the LabEx to the whole of Europe. And the LabEx is a very nice thing because you have people from the domestic, researchers working with research you attract. There's always the issue when you say, I will attract foreign researchers, that the local researchers said, well, okay, but you are starving me and you are giving to foreigners. If you create these labs, it's a win-win. Everybody wins because it's more for the people locally, and you attract on a long-term basis the best researchers worldwide. Okay, so until now the ERC has only provided non-renewable funding for individual research projects. The ERC lab that I would like to see created would be tasked with selecting, again through international peer review, excellent-based research lab project with renewable, that would be renewable. You see, like the LabEx are for 9 years, not 5 years. It would be 5 years renewable or 9 years, exactly like the French LabEx, okay? And of course, excellence should remain the main selection criteria. Of course, we should also attract good researchers in countries where they can no longer operate due to political constraints. Alors now you say, how do you finance this? Well, there is something called the Recovery and Resilience Facility, that was created in response to the COVID pandemic in 2021, and it totals more than 700 billion euros, which was made available to EU countries. To date, the European Commission has disbursed only 306 billion euros. So it means only 47% of the total amount has been disbursed. We propose allocating 10 to 20 billion euros from the undisbursed portion of the Recovery and Resilience Facility to fund at the European level this ERC for Labs program. Well, I think that would pose on the one hand, and the ERC, the European Laboratoire d'Excellence managed by an ERC for Labs program, I think those would be ways to boost, to take advantage. We have, Europe, we need to meet, we have to catch up with, US and China. We are technologically losing to them because they invested heavily in the whole innovation cycle from basic research to the most applied research. And they invested in breakthrough innovation. Europe is losing to them. So Europe needs to wake up. And we have a fantastic opportunity, which is the fact that you have, researchers these days are unhappy in the US. And so Europe can become really a very attractive hub for pushing research and while defending, the idea of freedom. Because, you see, the thing is that there is no high-quality research and high-quality innovation without freedom. Freedom and openness lie at the heart of the innovation process, starting with the basic research. And I think Europe now is the incarnation of freedom and openness. And I think that we should go full steam. Europe used to be a regulatory giant and a budgetary dwarf. Europe has to become a budgetary giant and invest massively in pushing innovation and pushing, creativity. Thank you very much.
We extend our sincere thanks to Professor Aghion for this remarkable contribution, which offers a profound and clear introduction to key issues of the day. Are there any questions for Mr. Aghion? Maybe there will be some questions for you.
Okay, so I stay. Absolutely, sorry.
Please. Are there any questions for Professor Aghion?
I think they are discouraged.
Please.
Yes, I have one question. So you talked a lot about the attractivity of scientists in public research institutions in France and Europe. What about the industry? So the industry in Europe is lagging behind, and there is now a great opportunity to attract other engineers to come to Europe. For instance, electric cars, we are lagging behind. But I bet you there are plenty of Tesla engineers who will want to leave. So why is industry not massively investing to attract all these people and recover from the technology gap in just a few years?
So in fact, you're right. I talk about POSE and ERC labs because I focus on the basic research part. Already we saw that there are big spillovers. You know, in fact, it's very interesting to look at the channels whereby the Laboratoire d'Excellence had technological spillovers on the neighboring industries. It's a lot through joint contracts, joint arrangements, you know. It's very interesting that they, if I just look at the channels, 1 second. When it was really collaborations, wait, I get the thing. Yeah, the two things were, in fact, the two channels were the development of formal collaborations, research contracts, supervision of PhD students, transfer of intellectual property, and the mobility of researchers towards private sector. So in fact, the LabEx was really boosted this. Those were the main channels, the mobility and the collaborations, you see. And so that paper that, you know, evaluates the impact of the LabEx also identifies the main channels whereby the LabEx had impact on the industry. So already that has an impact. But, you know, independently for that, you have the Draghi report. And what the Draghi report tells you is that what we are missing in Europe is a true single market. It won't be profitable to innovate in Europe until we have it was very interesting. There was 2 months ago, Draghi published a paper in the Financial Times showing that the trade barriers within Europe were more important than the ones that Trump subjects us to. You see what I mean? So first we need to really achieve, because in fact each country has kind of superimposes over the EU regulations. You see, so you have to remove within EU barriers. So that's a true market, single market for goods and services. The second thing, we don't have a proper financial ecosystem of innovation. We don't have anything like the network of venture capitalists in the US. We don't have true institutional investors. Sweden is a very interesting example of a country that developed institutional investors, pension funds, despite the fact that they have a pension system very much relying on pay-as-you-go, okay, répartition. Okay, so that's the thing. We don't have the whole, also, you know, we need to have more venture capital, more institutional investors to allow for more securitization of loans by banks. All that we are underdeveloped. So that's the whole financial ecosystem. And then of financing innovation, well, we don't have, you know, in the US they have the NIH, they have of course the NSF, they have also private foundations that fund long-term research. Here the problem we have in Europe, and that's something that Alain, did answer, we lack mechanisms to fund long-term research. In Europe, so that's on the basic research part. Okay, on the then there is of course the DARPA. There is you know all the way to do industrial policy in a smart way. I told you that competition is very important, and usually in Europe, in the name of competition policy, Brussels has always precluded any form of industrial policy or any form of sectoral state aid. And in fact, that's not right, because you can design industrial policy which is competition friendly. That's what the DARPA model or the BARDA does. You select, you know, sectors where you need priority action. Money comes from the ministry, but then you have team leaders and they can elicit competing projects. So it's a mixture of top-down and bottom-up. It's very intelligent because you have industrial policy which is pro-competition. We don't have anything in Europe that approaches DARPA or BARDA. The European Innovation Council doesn't have the governance of the DARPA, and basically funds small and medium-sized enterprises, but not breakthrough high-tech innovation. You see what I mean? So we need, on top of the LabEx, and I've mentioned the LabEx, you need the whole ecosystem of innovation to be developed. Long answer to your question.
Thank you, Professor Aghion, for this valuable talk.
Thank you.